I'm here with Coach Boo Smith on episode number 49. We're almost to episode 50 on the podcast here. We've done a bunch of them, and thanks to everyone who's been tuning in. Hopefully you've been enjoying the episodes, and thanks to Cesare for all his tech work. We're getting creative in here a little bit today, but Boo, I'm really excited to talk to you today about really everything that you do and your time at Gilman and your time at John Carroll and UVA and pretty much everything that we can get to and cover today in the time that we have here.
When you're as old as I am, you've got many different experiences.
So, Boo, maybe let's talk a little bit about your hobbies, because I know you're a man of many different hobbies. I see you on the sidelines of the lacrosse games with your camera. I see you out there rollerblading all the time. How did you get into sports photography? It's always interested me about you.
I think it deals with the art history aspect. And, coming out of college as an art history major, I was looking for a way to show my artistic talent because I'm not a painter. Mm-hmm. And I started very early with wildlife photography. And then I had two lovely young ladies. And as they matured and started playing sports in high school and college, I started recording the games and was getting some reasonable success with my shots. I'd go to their games and take pictures of everybody on the team, and it was a way to recognize my daughters as well as the team.
Yeah, it's a great hobby, and I've seen a lot of your pictures from this year in our lacrosse team and some of the action shots. How have you been able to perfect that craft and kind of get better at it? What's that process been like?
Curiously, when I started photography, I subscribed to a number of photography magazines. And just through osmosis, looking through them, you get an idea of what's a good shot. Mm-hmm. You can see what's effective and what isn't. And I think it's become subliminal. When you're lining up and getting ready to push the button, you're anticipating that right moment. Mm-hmm. And you have to anticipate. You can't wait for it because it's too late once you catch it.
Right.
Now, with lacrosse, I'm a little bit lucky having coached it for over almost 30 years. I can anticipate what somebody's going to do.
Yeah, that's true.
And so every now and then, yes, they do roll back when I expect them to. Mm-hmm. And every now and then they drop the ball.
You're always ready, though, and it does help to know the sport and being able to anticipate the next move. And so how did you get into lacrosse? Lacrosse has been such a huge part of your life, and you're obviously an outstanding player at Gilman and at UVA, and we can get into some of those memories that you have playing the game. But as a young man, as a young boy, who first introduced the sport to you? How did you get involved with it?
It was very interesting. Actually, I started in baseball, and I was playing baseball. It was a cold spring day, as usual. And I think I'd struck out 3 times and maybe had a couple of errors. And I looked at the field next door, and all these people are running around having a blast, and they're playing lacrosse. And my sisters had actually played lacrosse, so it wasn't totally foreign. And I said, that's it. And I traded in my glove for a stick, and that was the start.
I never had a choice like that. My dad, I don't think I played one inning of t-ball, baseball, anything. It was just from the start. I was given a stick.
Well, Dad was a baseball player, and he tried to get me to be a baseball player. But when that grounder bounced up and hit me in the forehead, that was it.
Yeah. How about at Gilman? Were there coaches that really helped you along in the sport of lacrosse who played a huge impact on you as a player at the beginning of your career?
The JV coach was Graham Menzies, and he was a very good coach. He connected with the students well and was a good teacher. So when I'm trying to learn the game, he was the right person at the right time. Mm-hmm. On varsity, it was George Chandlee who, through his deanship of lacrosse coaching, imparted a lot to us. A very good defenseman and an excellent guy named Furlong Baldwin would come out to practices. And so I would get his expertise as well. So then, believe it or not, I had an accident. We can't go into it in too detail. It's too long. But I had an accident up at camp, and boys Latin counselor was responsible for that accident, and he felt very guilty. And he heard that I was picking up lacrosse, and he was an all MSA defenseman. And he would come out to my house on the weekends and help me, which was really good.
So you got some private lessons. And
I got some private lessons, yeah.
Tutoring. Tell me a little bit about Chandlee as a coach, because I only really know the name from practicing on Chandlee Field and some of the stories that I've heard, but what was he like as a coach and a mentor for you?
Once again, I saw him more as a head coach because, as defenseman, you'd be split off. He was extremely well organized. He knew the game very well. And obviously, he stuck with plays that had been tried and true.
Yeah. And as a player, were there certain memories from your time on the lacrosse field that really stick out to you, or certain stories maybe from your time playing lacrosse at Gilman that really were the best memories for you here?
There was one that was sort of interesting. I'm not sure it's the best memory, but it stuck with me. We're playing St. Paul's for the championship, and they had a crease attackman who was the best crease attackman in the league and was scoring 4 or 5 goals a game. And I was a wingman, and I liked to roam. I like ground balls.
Yeah, you're king of ground balls.
Well, so somebody told me I still hold the Virginia record for a defenseman at 260 for a career, and 15 against Army. But anyway.
That was 82?
72.
72, sorry. When you played Army in the quarterfinals?
Yeah, quarterfinals. But no, as far as the memory goes, I had to sit on this guy. I had to sit in his back pocket, and it was driving me crazy. I'd see everybody out there going on. And it was like 2 minutes left game, 3 minutes left game, and the ball squirts out to the wing. And I succumbed. I went flying out there after it. They picked it up. And guess who was all alone by the crease? My man. And he scored the tying goal. And I will be carrying that as a bad memory forever if Teddy Bauer, a wonderful midfielder at W&L, didn't score the winning goal. I believe in overtime.
Was that championship game or?
It decided the championship.
Wow.
Yeah. So.
Awesome.
But I learned from that.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like he was cherry picking a little bit.
You better believe it. That's what He never left the crease. Never left the crease.
Yeah. And 72 was the year that you won the championship at Virginia, correct?
Correct.
72.
Correct.
So that game against Army, that was the quarterfinal game?
And curiously enough, in the semifinal, we played Cortland State. Back then, it was upstate New York, and they had gotten a tremendous number of good players. And their record was such that it got them into the playoffs.
But were they Division I then? Or was
they were Division I.
They were Division I.
Yeah. They had a really, really good attack, and not to brag about our defense at Virginia, their attack hadn't played our defense, or defense like it.
So when you were at Gilman, what was the process like of going to Virginia? How did you decide on Virginia?
I don't, like you with lacrosse, I don't think I had a choice. My fathers, my uncles, everybody going to Virginia. When you grew up, there was really only one college, and so applying to Virginia was obvious.
Best player you played with or against as a college lacrosse player at Virginia?
The best player I played against was a guy named Jack Thomas, and he played for Hopkins. And in that vintage, he was the best attackman in the country. And our styles somewhat meshed. He was extremely methodical, didn't have tremendous speed, but if you made a mistake, he scored a goal. And I didn't go for a stick. I played position. And had some success against him, but I knew that if I made a mistake, he was going to get gold.
Who were some of the other teams in the early 70s who were Virginia's top competitors? Because interesting enough, like Army was up there, and Cortland State, and
you had Maryland, and Cornell was arriving.
Right.
They actually won it in '70, my freshman year, when we should have won it. We'd gone undefeated, and then in the first round of playoffs didn't show up, and lost to Navy in the first round. But Cornell made a big run in the mid '70s, and they were very good.
Who was your coach when you were at Virginia?
Guy named Glenn Thiel. Glenn Thiel.
What was he like as a coach?
I've
heard the name.
Controversial.
Yeah. Controversial coach.
Yeah.
But you still had success when you were there.
He did. Technically, though, if you look at the talent we had, we could have won it 4 years in a row. We beat the national championship team my 4 years there, and won at one of them. So we were sitting on a lot of talent.
Yeah.
A lot of talent.
And lacrosse, grew up with it. I mean, you played a little bit baseball, but for the most part, you had a lacrosse stick in your hand. What about squash? When did you start picking up squash and getting into that sport?
I use that at to get in shape. It's not fun to go out there and run.
Yeah, it's a great
I'm not
sport.
one of these people. I don't like being by myself. I can't anyway. And squash is, as far as exercise go, in 1 hour,
It's
outside of wrestling, you can't get any better exercise than a good hard game of squash. And so I started playing that in college to get in shape for lacrosse. And then was very fortunate. There were 2 courts in the Bel Air area, maybe 10 minutes from my house, so I could continue to play after college.
Yeah. Perfect lifetime sport to work on your quickness and conditioning, and it only takes an hour, right, to get a good sweat in.
And the mental aspects of squash really can teach you concentration. You can't just go out there and go through the motions. You got to be thinking.
Right. Definitely applicable to the sport of lacrosse.
Yeah. Although sometimes people don't do that.
Yeah. So when you got out of Virginia and you studied art history at Virginia, what was your thought process like for the next step? How did you kind of figure out that you wanted to get into the world of education and teaching and coaching?
My mother had been a teacher, and of course, going to Gilman, I had many role models that I admired. I'd also been a camp counselor as well. I went to a camp up in Maine for 12 years as a little kid, and then 6 years as a counselor, and that falls right into teaching.
Is that Tecumseh Camp? Or
actually, it was called originally Moose Trail Lodge, and then it became Moose Cove Lodge. They switched locations. It was a Baltimore-based camp, and in the mid '80s, it went out of business. But it was a wonderful summer.
How'd you get back and find your way back to Gilman School?
Coming out of college, there was an opening at John Carroll for a wrestling coach, a lacrosse coach, and a history teacher. And obviously I fit that very well. So I started teaching at John Carroll. And then John Carroll was a young school, and the faculty was all in their 20s. And we got to know each other very well. There's a tremendous camaraderie. I still talk regularly to 3 or 4 of them. So teaching up at John Carroll was good. Bel Air had a nice existence. My daughters were at a very good school, Hartford Day School, and I was comfortable. Being dean of students there were lots of, you guys complained about some of the rules. There are lots of rules that sometimes led to some interesting decisions, and there were some times where some of the students did some things that I can't even mention here that really made my life miserable. Yeah. There would be times where a whole week of my life would be consumed.
Did you come into John Carroll as the dean of students?
No, about 5 years into it.
5 years into it.
It opened up.
How'd you make the decision that you wanted to become a dean of students? How did that happen?
To tell the truth, the headmaster was a fan of mine, and he wanted to expand my curriculum and my resume.
Mm-hmm.
And he suggested it. That I think you'll be a good dean of students. And I said, I'll give it a shot.
Sounds like it wasn't very easy at the beginning.
I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot. It was not mistake free, and there were some other challenges. But so when the art history job opened up at Gilman,
Mm-hmm.
okay, this is '97, fall of '97, I guess, and I was ready to move on from being dean of students. And the art history was 6 sections. Everybody took it, and that was my course load. And as I came in, I told the students, I'm never ever going to be dean of students again.
Mm-hmm.
And then in fall of 2002, Gilman lost a dean, and they couldn't find somebody over the summer. And so I got the call, and they said, how would you like to come out of retirement? And I said, okay, I'll do it for a year. And that was 2002.
What are so the position of dean of students? What are some of the daily challenges or some of the things that you have to work through in that position?
Hopefully they're not daily.
Yeah, hopefully they're few and far between.
Far between. I guess the one that you see the most in the log is poor decision making, where it covers a lot of things.
Right.
Classroom behavior, the hall behavior, the cafeteria behavior, and to tell the truth, that it's little stuff, and that's what we're basically dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
You know, every now and then there's something big, which we're not going to go into, but every now and then there's something big, like it was at John Carroll, but it just wasn't on the same level.
Right.
It just wasn't on the same
Kind
level.
of small things that you have to discipline students and get them back on track.
And talk to them, and
Yeah.
get their head in the right place, hopefully.
Right.
And some people listen, and some people are in my office the next day.
What have you really learned over your time as a dean of students? What are some of those things that you feel like you've gotten pretty good at or better at over the years?
I think the more you do the job, the better you get at understanding the students.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they surprise you, but sometimes you can anticipate problems, and I'd rather be proactive than reactive. But you've got to be careful. I guess with that said, one thing that's happened is, and you guys, I know, I don't know when any students are going to listen to this, but everybody talks about and complains when Gilman put in cameras. And one of the things it taught me is that what you think and what transpired wasn't necessarily the case, although it looks completely different.
Mm.
And the cameras have sometimes shown that and helped the students more than hurt them.
Right.
Because they are doing something stupid, but not really stupid, and it's really not troublesome.
Mm-hmm.
But when they told you that's what they were doing, sure,
Right.
And in the back of your mind, you really doubt it.
Yeah.
And then you go to the camera and, golly gee, he did that,
Yeah.
no problem.
So you can trust them a little bit more from the actual video evidence.
Yeah, I am learning that sometimes what you think are really good instincts can be wrong.
How did you become interested in art history, and how did you start wanting to teach that subject? Was that always something that you enjoyed, art history, growing up, or is that something that you found at Virginia, or where did that come from?
My mother, as I said, was a teacher. She taught at Bryn Mawr. She taught, history, Latin, Greek, and English. She was a cultured lady, probably the smartest person I've ever met. And around the house, there was all sorts of books. And, we didn't have the computer, so on a rainy day, I'd just pick up an art book and just start leafing through it. I've learned as you go on, some people are visual, some aren't. I'm visual. And art fell nicely into that. I think my father wanted me to go into the finance world, But my first finance course at Virginia convinced me that was not a good idea.
Well, a little dry.
And not successful. I got out of that real quick.
Yeah, art history is a really fascinating subject. And we had Sarah Lloyd was on here, and we were really diving into some of the things that she teaches in her class. Obviously, art history major too. But what are some things that you guys do in your class that you really enjoy teaching? Maybe some of the pieces or the time periods that you've really kept in your curriculum over the years that you feel the boys really enjoy and you really enjoy teaching?
I've sort of liked, obviously, to dissect a painting for symbolism. I think our students seem to like that when all of a sudden something looks very normal, all of a sudden becomes a symbol that, oh my goodness, yeah, that's what they're saying. And then you can get into debate, has an art historian, professional art historian, gone too far with it? Because,
made too many assumptions about it.
And, to stay relevant in art history or something like that, you've got to come up with theories, and all this has been done, so sometimes they're out there, and I'll do that on purpose. I'll choose some paintings that have been dissected, and the dissection is out there, and it's fun to shoot holes in it. But I find the symbolism aspect of it as good as, and I think the kids like that as well. I like paralleling the development of the art, how one style builds on the other style, and how they are affected. So if you're, let's say, looking at a Renaissance painting, you can hopefully go back to the Greek and Roman statues that we'd studied, or something of that nature.
All builds on top of each other.
Yeah, and seeing the influences. And then now we're getting into the late 1800s. We'll see art evolve towards contemporary art, and how it shifts from, an art that is based on buying and selling paintings, where the artist was under contract and had to come up with a certain style, or he wouldn't sell it, to where the artists started interpreting art as to what they believe is appropriate. We just started realism today, and we discussed, obviously it's what is real in society, not what is real photographic wise. So, and that's a change in art. You're shifting from a client-based, salon-driven academic art to an artist coming up and saying, well, this is what I should be doing.
Right.
And then that's going to become the basis of contemporary art, as each successive art movements have a different version of what they think art should be.
Yeah.
So,
who are some of the realist artists?
Courbet is probably the most famous. Millet is another. The Gleaners, you're probably familiar with.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So Daumier, the Third Class Carriage, is a wonderful painting, and a good look into how industrial society has divided families. But
it's really looking at the day-to-day life and the mundane that hasn't been covered before or looked at closely.
And it matches what's going on in Europe at the time. Europe is struggling with what is right in society, the Enlightenment, the philosophes. And then you get them examining education, you get them examining insane asylums, you get them examining government. And why not examine art? So it all falls in step.
What does a common Booth Smith art history class look like? Do you usually just put a new painting on the board on a given day, or is it more conversational, or how does it really unfold in your class?
Well, of course, you got the homework quiz. Okay.
Oh, you have a homework quiz.
You have to have the homework quiz. And then we've gotten two projects. One first quarter, which is now third quarter. Excuse me, my nose itches.
It's allergy season.
No, I think I'm in a dentist chair. It only happens when I'm in a dentist chair. But no, I said, where were we? My nose.
We were talking about your art history class and maybe what is a common after the homework quiz.
The two projects. Okay, the first one was current affairs, and trying to get people to dial in, see art history is not necessarily dead, and that there's something going on. And even in the ancient art, there's still being discoveries made that might be rewriting art history books. And then the second one, which has gone really well this year, my students have been sharp as a tack on it, is you make something. You've got it can be photography, it can be video, it can be sculpture, and it's based around the elements and principles of art. And so therefore you have to explain how you applied them into what you made. So that gives the kids a good introduction to the elements and principles other than a textbook knowledge. And they have proven to be, I think, worthwhile. And letting the kids see art history as something that isn't just graveyard.
Right.
And then, yes, I will then go into PowerPoints where we'll go through a number of different slides. What's really helped this year, or last 3 or 4 years, is that the image qualities on the internet has just gotten superb.
Yeah, I think there's, what is it, Google, some home Sweden.
Google Arts and Culture.
Google's Arts and Culture, you can really zoom in and it's super clear. And
they're limited in some of the paintings they have, but if you go to most of the major museums, they've done the same thing. You know,
on their museum sites.
Yeah. Now most of them are the National Gallery of Art in D.C. All their paintings are on their site and zoomable. You know, and the Met same way. I understand the Louvre supposedly has digitalized their whole collection. So you know, when I first got to Gilman, we were using slide projectors, and the slides were not all that good, and it was hard to stay focused. I'll have to admit, because the images weren't all that clear. And I'd like to think that the fact that you can now go in, you know, like we just did Watteau's Pilgrimage to Cythera, the legendary island of love, and you can see a little boy sitting on a quiver of arrows, tugging an old lady's dress. So you got Cupid. You know, I didn't even see that. Nobody could have seen that. Thanks to Gilman, I had a trip to Paris. You know, Gilman,
really?
Gilman is very, very good, and please take advantage of their summer travel programs. I've had 3 wonderful trips on there, but going to the Louvre and seeing it in person, I said, wait a second, look at that little twerp. You know? There's Cupid. You know. And then you see paintings that in an art history book are the picture's 20 years old and it's been restored. And that's another area that I like to go into, and I think the kids find interesting, is restoration of paintings. Obviously, Sistine ceiling and the Last Supper and Renaissance pop into your mind.
Where is the Last Supper? I've seen the Sistine ceiling, which is amazing.
It's in Milan.
It's in Milan?
Yeah, it's in a church in Milan.
Did you go there too, or?
When I went, you can't do this now. I don't think we went to Milan. We went to Florence, but Gilman had a trip. It took it every 2 years, and it was literally 6 to 7 weeks in Europe.
Really?
And it was a phenomenal trip. We started in England, went all the way through the continent, over to Yugoslavia, Croatia, then through the Corinthian Canal, Greece, cruised the Aegean.
6 to 7 weeks. Wow.
Yeah, and it was extremely well thought out. And, you know, like camp, those are one of the things that's just embedded in my mind. It was spectacular. And that might have helped me with art history. You know. I was telling my kids, to show you how things change. When we went to the Sistine ceiling, that was before it was restored. I don't have that good a memory of the Sistine ceiling because it's 7 stories up, and it was dim and dark, and I didn't leave there thinking I'd seen something special.
That is a ridiculous
and
experience.
You go in there, it's just phenomenal.
Yeah.
You know, and it just shows you how it can change.
Where else did you go on you said you went on 3 trips through Gilman?
2 to England.
2 to England.
And one, I did a side trip to Amsterdam, to the Rijksmuseum.
Oh, what was that like?
It's if you're into Northern Renaissance and Dutch art, it's the best.
Yeah.
They have the Night Watch there by Rembrandt, which is his masterpiece. And standing in front of that is, you know, remarkable. It's huge painting, and you can see all sorts of different things.
Amsterdam is where I want to go.
Yeah.
Sounds like a pretty...
It is. It's a wonderful city, and the Van Gogh Museum is there, and that's another spectacular.
Did you go there?
I went to the Van Gogh Museum.
Van Gogh is one of my favorites.
Yeah, and it's an amazing museum. And I think it's the most... Somebody said I think it's the most visited museum in the world, even more than the Louvre. But and then I took two into England. One was a countryside one, and the other was focused on London and the museums of London. It didn't hurt that my daughter just happened to be living in England at the time. and one time she had just had a young child.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, so somehow it fit in. I don't know why I applied for no, anyway.
You talked a little bit, or you mentioned how Gilman has changed since you were a student here, and how it operates now. Are there any other aspects of Gilman School that you feel have changed a lot since your time as a student here?
I'm sure that somebody will disagree, and you're certainly entitled to that. And some people might think that I'm being a Pollyanna, but when I came to Gilman in '97, I could pretty much see Gilman when I was here in '70. It had changed a little bit, but the interaction and the qualities, it was still very much a boys' school, a boys' school.
Mm-hmm.
And over the last 20 odd years, we're by no means there, but I see an evolution in Gilman. When I first came here, the art show was minimal, if not intended. Art was not only certain people took art. Only certain people did drama.
Was it way more athletically focused when you were here?
Definitely.
That was like the main thing with sports.
And the arts have emerged and become accepted. I'm not sure whether we've done it recently, but within the last couple of years, we tailgated for the play. And you can see the wonderful things that Mr. Chandlee's done with the art department, and how if you walk around Gilman, art is everywhere.
That's one of the things that I've said it before. I loved when I came here for the first time is all the art on the walls. It's like it's cool that art is celebrated so much here for boys.
It is, and the other thing also, not connect that, but we're by no means where we should be, and still need to improve. But we've become much more tolerant. Much more tolerant. You look around, and people have been able to find niches, at least I can see. There'll be a group of maybe 2 or 3, but they're friends having a good time talking. When I first came here, there was a number of people sitting by themselves. They couldn't find that niche. They were sort of left out.
Mm-hmm.
And I think an interesting scenario where a student was dealing with his identity at Gilman, and it was really, really, really difficult for him. And it was a rough 4 years. And he went off to college and transitioned. And he came back maybe 5 years later, just curious. And I talked to him a little bit, and he said, Mr. Smith, I've been walking around, and I've been noticing things. It's a different school. You guys have evolved. So, I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely, in my estimation from being here for 3.5 years, it's a very accepting place and tolerant place, and it's continuing to get better in that way, but I would agree with you 100%.
And as I said, it really is sort of fun to see these people establishing their little groups. And sometimes the little groups a long time ago would be working against one another, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, yeah.
And today, let them live.
Yeah.
I'm over here, you're over there, you're doing anything, that's great.
Right.
Not looking at them in a different way.
When you were here, who were some of the teachers and coaches who played a huge impact on you, who really inspired you, or maybe were part of the reason why you wanted to get into teaching and coaching?
In wrestling, it was Eddie Brown. He was an excellent wrestling coach who was able to connect with his students, and we had tremendous success, and I think a lot of it had to do with Eddie. And any wrestling coach or any coach has to set examples and has to push a student to do better. And in wrestling, it's critical.
Mm-hmm.
When you're out on that mat, you can't not give, what do they say, 120%.
I mean, it really is. Yeah, it's
and
there's no other sport like that.
Eddie was very good at that. He was very good at that. He could get to you and really inspire you when you're about to go out and wrestle.
What did he teach here, Eddie Brown?
Math.
Taught math here?
He taught math there. Curiously, my sophomore year in math was the best grades I got in Gilman. You know the teacher, you like the teacher, you work for the teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And I almost got 100 that year. But anyway, there are lots of people like that. A guy named Reg Tickner, who the Tickner fellow in the Tickner Center's about. His son was in my class, and we were best friends in lower school. And Reg was an excellent role model. He was also a wrestler and big guy, but he'd call you. He'd call you out. Mm-hmm. You're doing something wrong. He'd let you know. You couldn't certainly do that today, but in his office was the Board of Education in the lower school. And you can imagine what the Board of Education was all about. And the problem with that was because his friend and I were such good friends, he had absolutely no issue of using the Board of Education on me. Not that it needed to be at any time, but and of course, Reddy Finney, he lived the life that he preached, and you saw it and you knew it, and he was, he set the examples, and you wanted to be like Reddy. Mm-hmm.
Another wrestler too.
Yeah, another wrestler too. Yeah.
Pretty awesome. Was there a dean of students in your time for discipline?
There was Mr. Gamper, Billy Gamper's father.
Yeah, tell me about him, because that's another person
What's
I want to get on.
What's your name, son?
That's another person I want to get on is Mr. Gamper. But tell me about his dad as a.
Well, with Billy here, no. Mr. Gamper was a dean who went through and made sure boys could be boys, but when boys weren't being boys, he'd let you know. Mm-hmm. But he was a presence, and he was a character, and because of his voice, it always sounded like a duck. And you're talking about symbolism? If you go into the gym where his picture is.
Yeah, I've seen his picture.
Have you noticed what's in the background?
Is there a duck back there?
There's a duck flying in the background.
That's funny.
Yeah.
So, Boo, I was wondering a little bit about your book recommendation. Every guest that comes on the podcast brings in a book rec, and we were talking a little bit before the podcast. You brought Boys in the Boat. Great story. When did you first pick this book up, and why'd you choose it?
Actually, one of my squash players, Davis Owen, gave it to me for Christmas, and I don't think I fully appreciated it until I finished reading the book, because it's a lot about good coaching. So I read the book, and what I found in the book is it's about an 8-man shell, 9 altogether with the coxswain, and it's about the coaching that went into making them Olympic champions. And so I don't know whether any of you guys know anything about crew or anybody listening. It's unbelievably demanding. Mm-hmm. And sort of like wrestling, you have to go through heck, mm-hmm. Particularly in a match, okay, or in competition in rowing. By the end of that sprint, there's nothing left, And the book talked about that, it talked about, you got 8 people in the boat, they all got to be in sync. So it talked about teamwork, okay, mm-hmm. And then the pictures that I picture was when it talks about coaching, And the book sort of, I will say, reconfirmed a lot of things that were part of my life. Okay. And in the coaching, they talked about how the coach was innovative, how you did certain things a little bit differently, you know, and became successful. You go back in time, and I'm sure I wasn't the first one, but I was one of the first ones in this area, if not the first one, to run invert offenses. You know, nobody had heard of them, and that came to me from playing. You know, some reason or other, my attackman had come up to catch the ball, and so because he's out in front of the goal, he starts his dodge from front of the goal, and where am I?
Right.
And you know, all my life in lacrosse, we played behind the goal.
Yeah.
And I
So
said,
you're used to it.
yeah. I said, aha. Let's take a midfielder back behind the goal where he does have absolutely no idea what's going on, and certainly pull an attackman out front. And the attackman out front really produced a lot of goals one year because it just hadn't been done before, and the defense wasn't ready for it. And so, but anyway, they talked about in the book. They talked about coaches, you know, let's doing something different than you did maybe the year before, or looking at who is in your boat, and then adapting your strategy as to each person in the boat.
Yeah.
You know,
Playing to the strength of your players.
Yeah. A lot of times coaches have their playbook, and they just turn to the playbook and they force their people into those plays. At John Carroll, I got rid of my playbook each year because I knew I wasn't going to be dealing with the same kids in the same situation, and would start fresh depending on whether I had a left-handed feeder or a guy could crank from outside. And reading the boys in the boat and looking at innovations and coaching and things like that, and it sort of reconfirmed what I'd like to think I did as a coach.
Well, it's interesting that you applied this book about crew to lacrosse and your own coaching, and I think that's where I was introduced to this book is through playing lacrosse, because I think it applies, even though it's about crew, it applies to any sport because just like you said, crew, and I've never rowed crew myself, but it's really the ultimate team game. I would say football is similar, and you said wrestling is similar in a strenuous way, but this book about crew can be applied to really any sport because it's about coaching, it's about teamwork, innovation.
After college you start playing club ball, and then you start playing masters and grandmasters. If you can still walk like Hoffy.
Hoffy's not slowing down at all.
And I had two defensemen that I started playing a lot of ball with, and we made sure we got on the same masters and grandmasters team. And you talk about knowing the player. I know you've probably had this in attack when you're playing with two guys that you played with a lot, and just playing with those guys for literally 15 years. We were good together. You know, I knew when he was going to screw up, and he knew when I was going to screw up, and they were there to cover.
Yeah, it's all about chemistry.
Yeah. Okay, here goes Al Brown over his head. He's going to miss it this time. I'll be there.
Well, Boo, thank you so much for your book, Rack Boys in the Boat. It's excellent. I would double down on that and say I think people should read it, especially if you're involved with sports. It was actually the summer reading one year for the Gilman faculty. Was it? Yeah. But I, as I said, because of Davis gave it to me already. Yeah. And thank you for coming on to the podcast. It was an awesome time talking to you and hearing a little bit more about your time at Gilman and, all of your knowledge from this place and from playing sports and coaching and everything you do here. One thing I didn't ask you about, though, is I talked to you about photography at the beginning, but rollerblading is another one of your hobbies that we didn't cover. How'd you get into that? How'd you get into rollerblading? I actually, we have a bunch of us. I mean, it goes back to me and another teacher at John Carroll who've been playing pond hockey forever. So I'm a skater. I'm not a great skater, but we have fun. A lot of trash talk and a little bit of hockey. And when rollerblades came out, I said, this is it. And then as I got older, my knees and hips, I wanted to make sure it's low impact. And now that I've got these two metal rods in my back, thanks to the cancer, I can't do impact. I was crossing the street the other day,
and somebody sped up. I said, wait a second. And I had to sprint. And, oh, did that hurt? Just boom, 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 boom.
Yep.
And so the rollerblading's good. It's good. I can do that. It's out. You don't get the jarring, and it doesn't affect my rods that much.
Yeah, you fly around. You fly around campus.
I'm slowing down a little bit, which is probably smart.
Well, Boo, thanks so much for coming on. It was a great time talking to you
Thank
today.
you for giving us the time, and thanks for all you've done.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. It's been fun.
We'll do.
Thank you, Cesare.
Thank you, Cesare.